Should big tech communications companies such as Google, Facebook, and Twitter, as well as American college campuses, be required to comply with the First Amendment free speech guarantees, or does private ownership override these protections?
The First Amendment is the First Amendment. You have a right to say what you want to say. Now, you have to be smart about what you say because there's always a consequence. But that shouldn't limit you from saying what you need to say or want to say. So big tech, I think we need to look at them through probably an antitrust lens. Start there. College campuses, we probably need to look at them and tie their federal funding and student loans to the benchmark of First Amendment protections that that campus embraces or doesn't embrace. Hurt them in the pocketbook. Call in those student loans. Do not, and this is a tangential piece, but do not forgive student loan debt. That undermines every person in here who's ever paid their bills, whether they're education bills or otherwise. They made the decision, they made the commitment, and we need to have colleges and universities underwrite the loans that they give to their students. And you will see a drastic decrease in the number of humanities majors and the cost of those majors. Let's make it a market system. That's the best way to reduce costs, embrace liberty and free speech, and it's imperative that we do that.
Chairman, could you please repeat the question?
Should big, let me use the microphone here. The question again is, should big tech communications companies such as Google, Facebook, and Twitter be required to comply with First Amendment free speech guarantees, or does private ownership override these protections? And I also include in that college campuses.
I believe in the First Amendment. I'm glad that Elon Musk bought Twitter because some voices were being silenced, not some, many voices were being silenced, not just on Twitter, but also on Facebook. I think that people should be able to say whatever they want to say unless they're hurting other people. And I think that there's probably a lot of disinformation going on social media. So we need to let the free markets work and create more social media outlets like True Social and other social medias, because the more free information there is out there, the more that people will get informed, the more choices there will be. Okay, thanks.
I'm a constitutional first and foremost, so the First Amendment is absolutely important in everything that we do. And so big tech, regardless of whether it's private or public, should not be silencing anyone. And this goes back to Section 230 and how big tech needs to be reformed and ensure that voices are heard and there's no propaganda as part of whatever it is that they're looking to inform the public of. So I think that big tech should be complying with the First Amendment. I think regardless of whether they're a Republican, a Democrat, or anything else, their voices should be heard. And you can say whatever you want, up to a limit. You have to be sensible about it. But we do need to hold big tech accountable for their censorship, and we've seen that happen with Elon Musk buying Twitter. And so we need to continue to push Google and Facebook and other platforms as well, because they're the ones that are holding our information and they can do whatever they want, and they can micro-target us with disinformation, and we need to make sure that that does not happen in this country. Thank you.
I also am 100% for First Amendment rights. That's why it's number one, because they knew that that was going to be the first line of attacking a nation, is they could take away our voices. And this is also a Section 230 where we do need to reform this, so we are able to have free voices in every single market. And I know a lot of things that they will say to us, especially after what we've gone through in the last 6 years in our nation. They'll say, well, just go start your own platform. Well, we've had multitudes of people go and do that, and they keep shutting them down because they own the servers, or they own the private or the public space for them to be able to create a platform. And so we're not able to actually have freedom on these other platforms. And Google and Facebook and other Instagram and all these other voices have been able to shut conservative voices down. And I also don't believe that conservative voices should be cutting down liberal voices either. It's really important that we have a balance for our First Amendment. We have to be able to speak what we want and speak what we say. And we should fight and continue to fight for our First Amendment. Again, that's why they made it number one. And with colleges, we should cut federal funding from any college that goes against the Constitution. We cannot allow American dollars, our tax dollars, to continue to fund this woke agenda for them to indoctrinate our kids and teach them things that have nothing to do with their education, nothing to do with their ability to get a job later on, but instead it changes the face of America, it changes our values, and we have to continue to fight against that, and we can do it with our dollars. Thank you.
My name is Heerak Christian Kim, and you know that I am MAGA America First candidate who fights for First Amendment and Second Amendment rights. I am encouraging Glenn Youngkin to pass constitutional carry into law in Virginia. And many people who support Second Amendment say we cannot have the First Amendment protection without the Second Amendment protection. Now I'm talking about First Amendment protection here. For those of you who've been following my Twitter account, you have seen me post a Confederate flag on my Twitter account multiple times. The reason I do that, and I state that in my Twitter account, is that I support freedom of speech. I'm in Virginia, and Virginians have the right to fly their Confederate flag at their home without being persecuted, without being fired from their job. They have the right to celebrate their cultural heritage. My favorite Civil War general is Stonewall Jackson, and I love the fact that Friedrichsburg is there celebrating his achievements. Because he was a great Presbyterian Christian who loved Jesus and followed the Bible every step of the way. For me, I don't think Virginians should be fired from their jobs for flying the American flag or liking Stonewall Jackson, or be persecuted in public schools or at university. As you know, when I was vice president at Georgetown University Graduate Student Government, for 9,000 graduate students in the law school, medical school, nursing school, school of public policy. Liberal progressives attacked me because I am MAGA, America First, Trump supporter, and started calling me anti-Semite, racist, Islamophobe, just because I'm Trump, MAGA, America First. And some writers have attacked me as well, and that's just uncalled for. But many people who are Republicans get called anti-Semite, racist, Islamophobe just for being Republican. That's because we're not protecting First Amendment rights. And if I become a congressman, I will protect your First Amendment rights and your jobs.
Yeah. Thank you. Again, I would remind everyone, I know we get heated, but try to keep it under 2 minutes, please. At 2 minutes. Okay, in a similar vein, Monica, this one is for you first. Is there a role for the federal government in supporting school safety and ensuring sound curriculum, such as revising the standards of learning, national standards of learning, and banning CR2 as examples.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I think that the federal government has a great capability of influencing our school system, even though the school systems are funded at the state level. The U.S. Department of Education budget is the third largest budget of all of the federal agencies, and right now that budget is being used for higher education, mostly for higher education grants. And I believe that money should instead be used for metal detectors at schools, at public schools. I have 2 children that attend public schools. I don't know if anyone else here does, if they have children who, please show me whose kids are in public schools right now. Okay, maybe all your kids go to private schools, I don't know. But there are a lot of voters in the 8th district whose kids go to public schools. And I think that controversial issues should not be taught in public schools. I think that the federal government should not fund or promote any teaching of controversial issues in public schools. Those topics are best left for maybe private colleges or adult discussions. And I believe that the government should try to promote just old-fashioned subjects in schools like math, or reading, science, and music, and literature. Furthermore, I think that languages should be taught in public schools, different languages, and that is a way to promote open-mindedness and modern values. Thank you.
So we should be letting parents determine what is being taught to their children, and the government should stay out of the classroom. So, education is definitely near and dear to my heart. I've gone through the public school system in Baltimore City, and I still made it out alive, and I went on to earn a master's degree from Johns Hopkins. So it's not completely terrible, but we can definitely ensure that we have improvements to our system, and we've seen that with Glenn Youngkin and how he's captured the critical race theory that's being taught to our children, which is inappropriate at the ages it's being taught, first of all, and we should have transparency into what happens in the hallways and what is being taught in the classroom. And we've seen it right here in Minnie Howard High School in October when the school board and everyone associated decided to cover up an assault on a young lady, and it wasn't exposed until March of this year. Everyone on that board should be fired and held accountable. School choice. If my mother knew what school choice was, I probably would not be in Baltimore City public school system. And so we should be supporting parents' decisions to send their child wherever they feel appropriate and wherever they believe that their child will best succeed. And in terms of funding, the federal government, especially the Appropriations Committee, should be the one that determines that. And there's very creative ways of ensuring that the money is following the student. And we can do that with ensuring that infrastructure bills are being tied into what is being taught in the schools. And we can ensure that through other ways and means, and ensure that we are, Bethany's on me. Thank you.
As a mom of 4 kids, this is something that's incredibly important to me. And I've had to fight for my children many times as a parent. And I understand that battle, and I understand the confrontation with the school boards. I understand the confrontation with the principals. Even for myself, I had one time, my 11-year-old daughter, but when she was in kindergarten, had a student on the bus say he was going to bring a gun to school the next day and he was going to shoot her. Instead of the principal calling me that day, they let it go by for 3 to 4 days, and then the superintendent called me instead and said, this is a situation, but I don't believe he means anything by it. He comes from a good family. And I hope that you won't sue, but it is your right if you want to, since we didn't report it to you immediately. This is ridiculous. This should be something that we have to continue to demand, transparency and change within our schools. We cannot allow for teachers, we cannot allow for principals, we cannot allow for the districts to hide things from us. I believe that the schools should stay local, the curriculum should stay local, and I believe that as parents, again, we should have the ability to have transparency to decide on those things. I will always fight for parents' rights, and I understand the need to fight for those rights because, again, I have done this. We can take back control of our children's education, and that can be through school choice, which I believe will cause competition within our markets between the public and the private sector, because no one loses when there's actually school choice, because it will force each school to actually be better for the student if they know they have to compete for the dollars that go with the kids. So I will be fighting for parents' rights, for school choice in every ability that I can, and I will continue to stand for your students and for my students and my children, because I do understand the importance of having a good education. Thank you.
As you know, I'm a public school teacher. I'm licensed in the state of Virginia. I'm licensed in Washington, D.C. I'm licensed in Alabama. I like the South, so there are several states that I'm seeking licenses from. And so I am intimately aware of what goes on in the classroom. And critical race theory and LGBTQ grooming is kind of forced upon the classroom from, I would say, the system or the DC swamp. Because as you can see, the first day that Joe Biden took office, he issued executive orders to advance transgenderism and LGBTQ rights. As you have seen, Psaki Defend giving gender transforming hormones to your children who are like 10 years old. And many public school districts do that without their parents' knowledge to help the students transition. This is protected by Department of Education because it comes from top-down executive branch, Joe Biden. And that's why we need to bring Trump back in 2024 or have another Republican president like DeSantis, whom I really like, because we need to change the system, which filters down into the educational systems through Department of Education, Federal Department of Education, and State Departments of Education. I call on Glenn Youngkin to fire the liberal progressives in Virginia Department of Education because they're committed to this ideology of critical race theory and LGBTQ indoctrination. We need to transform and reform the system. And if you elect me to US Congress, I will start passing laws at the Congress level to reform the system. And that's what we need to do. Thank you.
We need to teach our children how to think, not what to think. It's Department of Education, not the Department of Indoctrination. The federal government has no role in educating our children. It belongs to the states and it belongs to parents, period. We need to move our education system to the private sector. We need to privatize it, make it a market-based system. And we can do that and still protect those who are less fortunate so that they can get a good education too. But at the end of the day, parents must have the choice because parents have the responsibility for raising and teaching their children. That's not the role of government. And by privatizing, we can limit the role and influence of the unions that protect bad teachers and bad administrators, so that when you have things that happen like they did here at the school, those people can get fired on the spot. They can get prosecuted on the spot. There are children. I have two kids in Arlington Public Schools. At the beginning of COVID, they were in 1st and 3rd grade. And I had to have 2 conversations with the principal about teachers teaching their politics to my children in the 1st and 3rd grade. I cannot begin to tell you how disturbing it is to realize what's going on and hear it firsthand. We need to protect our children because they are the future of this nation. And if they don't know the history and they don't have the liberties, we won't have this nation.
I think I already answered the question.